So let's jump into game 1, Lee, and see exactly how this match is going to go down. I want to see if Colossal is going to be able to keep making a name for itself here in Players Cup. On the right hand side of the field, which is going to be I believe Antonio Sanchez Cervan's side, we have got the Colossal and the Incineroar, whereas on Guillermo's side we have got the Dragapult and the Rotom Heat.
Yeah, it's, you know, Antonio leading not with an option to kind of boost the Colossal here, but kind of just going with the Incineroar, which gives you that fake out support. Not going to be so useful against the Dragapult, but going to be very useful against the Rotom here. I think if you are Antonio, you've got to keep in mind that potentially there would be a Zacian sitting in the back for Guillermo, so you may want to try and, you know, pivot out with Incineroar right now, get something like a parting shot onto the Rotom slot or the Dragapult, and just keep that Incineroar in the back for when the Zacian does come onto the field. So there's a lot to think about here, but you know, what's the Dragapult got on Guillermo's side? Does it have access to something like Surf? It would pair up nicely with something like the Gastrodon, and if it does, it could potentially go for, you know, a Max Geyser into the Colossal and do some considerable damage. And there is a few threats here. Obviously the open team sheets make it a little bit easier for our players to decide what to do, but it's nice to see Antonio kind of leading out without that kind of direct support option from the Colossal straight away.
I mean, Guillermo nearly running out of options there. The clock was ticking down to the last 1 or 2 seconds. But they've decided to opt for the Dynamax of the Dragapult. Again, this is something we saw a lot yesterday. It's kind of coming back into the fray in Series 8. Dragapult being such a great Pokemon to be able to Dynamax up. It's got lots of different utility options. Critically, can sometimes boost up the speed with those max airstreams that can be pivotal. On Antonio's side of the field, though, we're going to see a Dynamax as well. And I think, to no surprises, it's going to be that Colossal.
Yeah, and the Colossal coming out here, well, it's not really threatened, you know, especially if you know that the Dragapult hasn't really got a means to be able to hit you for super effective damage. You've got a really easy turn to just go for the Gigantamax and start maybe getting that G-Max Volcalith onto the board and start getting that residual damage kind of chipping around at Pokemon. You've got a really easy target into the Rotom Heat here and remove that from the field. If you can connect, obviously being weak to rock type moves isn't going to be a kind of a Pokemon that wants to sit on the field and take these attacks.
Well, damage being thrown across the field from Guillermo to Antonio. Going to be going for that Max Phantasm, lowering the defense on the opposing side of the field. Jaguar, however, is going to have to take the Max Rockfall. That's going to start, the G-Max Volcalith. That's going to start setting the rocks around on Guillermo's side of the field. We also see a little side activation there. Coming out from the Incineroar, which is not going to activate the weakness policy, but will activate the steam engine with the side flare blitz. So it now does allow Colossal to be the speediest thing on the field. It can apply pressure by having that kind of first move in the next turn.
Yeah, that's a really cute play here from Antonio. I do love that, just to activate that steam engine, you know, and give it that speed boost that it really is missing here in front of two Pokemon that are faster than it, and gives it a way easier time as well. If that Zacian comes in, it means it's going to get the jump onto it, and it's still got that weakness policy intact as well, which makes it difficult for Guillermo to, you know, freely hit into that slot. If you're not sure about picking up the knockout, it is very risky. But we are finally seeing the Gastrodon hit the field for Guillermo, Lou.
Yeah, really nice play there, particularly if the Incineroar is not running something like a Dark type move, then Guillermo's going to know, due to open team sheets, that it is not going to be a threat to the Dragapult. Sometimes it runs those Dark type moves, but if it's not, you might as well use that Incineroar to try and do some good for your partner Pokemon. It's going to be another Volcalith, however. It's going to catch the Gastrodon on the switch-in, but Gastrodon's going to be able to take that reasonably well, as Dragapult can go for a... Oh, looks like it's going for the Max Wormwind. So the Zacian switch-in here being Fairy type, a really good play here by Antonio.
Yeah, that's a really nice play from Antonio, kind of denying that attack completely, and also kind of preserving your Incineroar as well for the late game. The Zacian coming in as well, it's got its attack boost, so it's going to be able to pressure the Gastrodon with whichever attack that you decide to go down. And obviously with the Colossal, there's the potential to double up into that slot as well, because you know how much of a threat Gastrodon could potentially be in this match. You kind of want to put maybe all your eggs into one basket onto that side of the field, because even if it switches out at this point, you know the return that you're going to get with the Zacian and the Colossal kind of doubling up into that slot is always going to be very good damage, and potentially a knockout as well. So Guillermo kind of pinned here. And it is a difficult situation, and Dragapult not being as effective as you kind of normally would see it when it does go for that Dynamax.
The Gastrodon here just going for a Protect. It looks like it's going to be the Max Overgrowth coming out from that Colossal, though, activating the Rindo Berry on the Gastrodon. I mean, we talked about the weakness the Gastrodon has to Grass type moves, and Rindo Berry certainly is a way to try and avoid taking that massive super effective damage for one particular turn. It does activate on the turn where the move goes through Protect, so it really doesn't do too much damage, but it doesn't now allow Gastrodon that protection later on when it maybe would have taken a more direct attack. Dragapult is, however, going to go for another Max Phantasm, targeting down into that Colossal. It did take this defense drop earlier, so it's going to deal a decent chunk of damage here, but Colossal, you see its bulk, you see its HP, it's able to hang on, showing that it's just such a tanky Pokemon. Behemoth Blade going to come out though from the Zacian, going to be able to target down directly into that Dragapult, of course doubling its damage as it is targeting into a Dynamax Pokemon. It is enough to be able to pick up a KO, so Guillermo is going to be losing the Dynamax Pokemon on this turn.
Yeah, it's a big play here from Antonio, removing the Dragapult, so it's not really an issue going forward anymore for Antonio to deal with. The Protect there from Gastrodon, nice, but again, you know, the residual damage here that you're getting from the G-Max Volcalith, it's just picking up too much damage every turn. The Gastrodon in range now for the Zacian to be able to pick up a knockout. The Steam Engine activated on the Colossal, so going to be able to fire off maybe one of those big fire-type moves, especially into the Zacian that's just hit the field for Guillermo.
Yeah, I really like that play from Antonio as well, knowing that was kind of the final turn of the Dynamax. If you allowed the Dragapult to stay in on the field, it could potentially have gone for a Will-O-Wisp on that next turn into something like the Zacian, and we've seen how detrimental that can be to a Zacian's strategy. So being able to protect your Zacian from Antonio, like you said, now just does allow him that momentum. Colossal's really fast, can apply a lot of pressure to both actually the Gastrodon and the Zacian there due to the low HP that Gastrodon has got. And Zacian, of course, we've seen how much damage that Behemoth Blade can do.
Yeah, and that's it. I think like Antonio maybe would have liked the Sun Up here as well. If you could predicted maybe the Protect on the Gastrodon there, get the Sun Up, and then you've got like the Heat Wave to kind of power up your next move against the Zacian, but not going to see that. He's preserved that Incineroar perfectly for this exact situation to come in and weaken the opposing Zacian on Guillermo's side of the field, take away that Intrepid Sword boost, which is really nice for his own Zacian to be maybe able to take an attack here and get rid of that Gastrodon once and for all.
Yeah, I really like this play here. We're going to see the Behemoth Blade come out though. Not going to be able to deal as much damage thanks to the neutral setting due to the Intimidate. Gastrodon, however, is not going to be able to take it as well and going to be falling victim to the Sacred Sword coming out from the opposing Zacian here. You can see as well the rocks that are still going around giving this residual damage going to be chipping away at Zacian, but of course it's going to be slightly counteracted by the grassy terrain that the Colossus set up earlier. The one thing that's always critical to remember though, Lee, is those sort of damaging residual effects, they go first.
Yeah, they do go first. So if you're too low health and does take you below that, the grassy terrain cannot save you in those situations. But the Rotom Heat coming in now. You know, it's not an ideal situation. Is it going to be able to take an attack from Antonio Zacian? That's the question, because there is Fake Out present now from the opposing Incineroar. And, you know, like Antonio has the option where he could potentially just protect his Zacian, switch the Incineroar out to bring it in again to potentially get another Intimidate onto Guillermo's Zacian and really weaken it. But you maybe want to just try and take advantage of this turn where you do have the active Fake Out and maybe try and get a knockout onto the opposing Rotom here.
Incineroar just going to go for the Fake Out into the Zacian here, going to stop it from dealing any damage. The Zacian on the opposing side of the field though, going to be going for that Behemoth Blade. It's of course free to attack, no Fake Out coming out in its direction, and it's able to deal a huge chunk of damage to the Zacian on Guillermo's side, living on only 18 HP remaining. Rotom, however, it is going to try and capitalize on this opportunity and go for that nasty plot. Now this can always be the thing that is the turn of events, but like you mentioned, the Zacian on Antonio's side is dealing a huge chunk of damage, and it looks like it is the faster of the two.
Yeah, the nasty plot there is a really nice option because it starts to kind of detract a little bit of attention away from the Zacian on Guillermo's side of the field and makes that Rotom very threatening now. Obviously going to be able to pick up an easy knockout onto the Zacian with the Overheat if it decides to go down that route, and it's probably in a position where it maybe can take an attack. It'll be very close whatever we see, but you know, the one thing is if you do attack into that slot with your Zacian, if you're Antonio, then it does leave you open to getting taken down by the opposing Zacian.
Yeah, I like this play here by Antonio. You know, we know that it outspeeds the Rotom, but we don't know if the Zacian on Guillermo's side is going to outspeed. So just to be safe, go for the Protect, allow your Incineroar to try and pick up the KO against Guillermo's Zacian. The Incineroar actually deciding to go for the parting shot into the opposing Rotom, wants to weaken the damage output that it's capable of thanks to that nasty plot that it did earlier. It does mean that the Zacian on Guillermo's side is able to stay on the battlefield at the moment, putting Antonio Zacian still in a slightly precarious situation going into this next turn, but it does wonder what the Pokemon from Antonio is going to be coming out here. We haven't even seen the fourth Pokemon yet, Lee.
No, and there is a couple of options that it could be either maybe the Rillaboom or maybe even the Urshifu here. If it is the Urshifu, it will have access to Aqua Jet, and that's probably going to be able to pick up the knockout onto the opposing Zacian and Guillermo's side of the field. And if it is the Urshifu as well, then it will have access to the potentially a Focus Sash, which makes it easier for dealing with that Rotom as well, alongside the Zacian that you've already got out on the field. So be interesting to see which option it is. I don't think it really decides the game here and now, but you know, Guillermo doing everything to try and preserve this match and kind of claw it back the best he can. But it is going to be that Urshifu that does come out onto the field now for Antonio.
The grassy terrain, though, is helping out the Zacian on Guillermo's side, regaining a little bit of HP. It's going to be interesting to see if something like the Aqua Jet is going to be enough. Guillermo could also potentially play it a little bit strategically here, but it looks like he's actually gone for a slightly different option here, maybe starting to think ahead to Game 2. And I think this is the interesting thing in these best of 3 sets. If potentially Game 1 hasn't gone your way, you've maybe got a little bit more insight into the players', I suppose, their kind of gameplay style. You can then take a second, breathe, recuperate, and then come back into Game 2 with a different strategy to try and push it to a Game 3.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And, you know, just taking your time in between these turns is so imperative, because it does give you that thinking time for potentially future games and future situations that are similar, and how players can kind of adapt and kind of prepare a little bit better so that situation that they're in, the bad one, doesn't really occur once again. And we do just see the forfeit there. So we are going to see Antonio take the lead in that first one.
Yeah, very exciting to see Colossal still giving itself a good reputation. We didn't actually get to see the whole synergy with the weakness policy and the steam engine, but I think really early on in that game, activating up the steam engine from the Flare Blitz on the Incineroar was a really great strategy. It just allowed that Colossal to be a little bit more formidable in the face of that Dynamax Dragapult that we know is going to be outspeeding most of the time, and then kind of playing with the speed tiers a little bit just meant that the Dragapult wasn't as safe as, you know, previously thought.
Yeah, it's an amazing play, really. I loved it, everything about it, because it not only puts a Colossal in a great position, it kind of checks the play that Guillermo could go for with the Dragapult, where he max airstreams and potentially switches in Zacian for the Rotom Heat, which would make sense because the G-Max Volcalith is a prime target, so the Zacian coming in there will be able to take that. And then you've got the Zacian on +1 with its +1 attack as well, the Incineroar already out on the field, so he's sitting in a really good position to kind of counteract that and make sure if that does occur, then the Colossal's going to be in an extremely good position going into that next turn, just covering bases. And I really like that. Made it very difficult for Guillermo to kind of get a hold of that game, and he did well. You know, the nasty plot plays, he picks opportunities perfectly to really kind of capitalize on where he can put a lot of pressure on and kind of split decisions for players, and he did that with the nasty plot and the Zacian, but unfortunately it wasn't enough in the end, where the Urshifu kind of came in and was able to kind of close it up, especially with that Incineroar still in the back.
Yeah, that was the thing. The Colossal went through that game relatively unchecked. Even though we saw the Gastrodon on the field, the kind of slow nature of the Gastrodon as well meant that it was an easy target, particularly when you see that there is the potential of a max overgrowth to come out from that Colossal. Pair that with something like the weakness policy, I'm not even sure the Rindo Berry would be enough.
Probably not. Not if we didn't see a Protect or a Dynamax there. It would be very iffy, I think, and that's something that you know, Guillermo has to be very worried about and conscious of. I think the Gastrodon really was in an awkward position where it took damage on a switch in. It was you want to try and avoid that situation, and then the residual damage with the G-Max Volcalith on top of that made it even more difficult to really utilize the Gastrodon, especially when a Zacian comes in for Antonio and it's got that attack boost, and you can just put that automatic pressure onto the Gastrodon. And Guillermo didn't really have the Intimidate support to kind of neutralize the Zacian like Antonio had for Guillermo's Zacian.
Exactly, and as we move into Game 2, we'll be able to see what adjustments are going to be made to see if Guillermo is able to maybe find a different kind of check for that Colossal, and Game 2 is exactly where that's going to happen. So let's jump right into the action and see exactly how they're going to maybe change up their leads, and if Antonio is maybe going to stick strong with that Colossal. And that's what I see on my screen, Lee, paired up once again with that Incineroar that we know can give a cheeky self-activation for that steam engine. A nice adjustment though, however, for Guillermo. I see a Gastrodon and a Grimmsnarl, a Pokemon that can certainly get up to a few tricks on the field.
Yeah, it's a really nice adjustment here for Guillermo. Instantly puts a lot more pressure onto the Colossal and makes life a lot more difficult for it to perform, because especially if the Grimmsnarl on Guillermo's side can get up maybe a light screen and the Gastrodon decides to go for the Dynamax here, it is going to be able to take a G-Max Overgrowth attack, or no, Max Overgrowth attack from the Colossal, especially without that activation of the weakness policy, and then return with a Max Geyser or potentially a Max Quake, which, like I say, it makes life very difficult for Colossal to kind of perform here. And if you're Antonio, kind of want to have Rillaboom in the back, really, of all your options here. But we'll see how this plays out as a Protect comes out from that Colossal.
Yeah, Colossal maybe just wanting to scout out what the Gastrodon is capable of. We do see, I think there was a light screen coming out there from the Grimmsnarl, so boosting up the special defenses of Guillermo's side of the field. Gastrodon, however, is going to have its special attack and attack dropped by one stage by that Incineroar, so no self-activation here. Antonio maybe wanting to get one of the more traditional Pokemon onto the field to be paired up next to that Colossal to activate the Steam Engine and also critically activate the weakness policy. Unless the Gastrodon really wants to do anything too tricksy here to the opposing Colossal, is going to be in a really safe position to get those activations up and start dealing out some really destructive damage. Of course, particularly considering the Gastrodon now is at -1, it really isn't the offensive threat that it could potentially be.
No, definitely not. I think the potting shot play there, really nice from Antonio, just kind of making it less of a threat going into the next turn, especially because you've still got the ability to maybe bring something in next to the Colossal now and get that set up like you want, like you've already mentioned. But the Zacian coming onto the field as Antonio opts for that with the Intrepid Sword ability activating, giving it that +1 attack going into this first turn.
Yeah, the Earth Power not being able to find its target on the Colossal either there. And interesting switch from Antonio, bringing in the Zacian. It's able to obviously get its Intrepid Sword boost up, and it can apply some pressure to the opposing Grimmsnarl, maybe just trying to remove that pesky Pokemon from the field before it's able to maybe go for some things like Taunt or Spirit Breaks to reduce the special attack of something like the Colossal.
Yeah, that's it. I think the Zacian does a really nice job, kind of forces almost a Reflect to kind of come up here to give you a little bit more stability against the physical nature of the Zacian, which does leave the door open for you to potentially get a knockout with the +1 onto the Grimmsnarl, depending on how Guillermo has trained it.
Yeah, Gastrodon just going to return, reset its stats, and Rotom was going to join the party of the action here. This is where it can apply some of those Fire-type moves to the Zacian and potentially help out the Grimmsnarl in these later turns. But to no surprises here, I'm going to see a Colossal Gigantamax happening on Antonio's side. It really is in that safe position, even though it may not be able to get its activations up. The fact that it could go for something like a G-Max Volcalith into what potentially is the Rotom switch in here as well can be devastating for Guillermo. I think being able to set up the Volcalith and get those rocks doing the residual damage is critical, whether you're boosted or not. And as you mentioned, Lee, it does force that Grimmsnarl to go for that Reflect in the face of the Zacian. The Zacian, however, is going to be going for that Behemoth Blade. I wouldn't be surprised to see this targeting down into that Grimmsnarl slot. That's exactly who it has connected with. Does a huge amount of damage and picks up the one-hit KO despite the Reflect that's up. There's no critical hits there. That does just show the absolute devastation that Zacian is capable of. You can see the Volcalith coming out from this Colossal. Oh, and Lee, the Rotom is being destroyed here on the field. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Oh, you called it, Lou, with the G-Max Volcalith, and you know, it's a really nice call from Antonio here, thinking maybe the Gastrodon not in the best position right now with the point shot drop, wants to switch out to come back in later, and catching that Rotom is so huge because it's so low health now. It was quite effective in that game one when Guillermo brought in and put on certain bits of pressure, but now it's so low it's going to go down to another bit. One more turn of the G-Max Volcalith residual damage is going to be enough to take it down. Gastrodon able to come in though. It is going to have that reset stat, so it's going to be back to normal, but still got to be a little bit wary about getting hit with a G-Max Overgrowth from the Colossal here, because that will still, even with the Rindo Berry, it's still going to do a lot of damage, and then with the residual damage on top of that, and when you kind of combine that with the Zacian that's on +1, there's a lot of offensive pressure coming from Antonio's side of the field.
There certainly is. So Guillermo does have to find a way to match that offensive pressure and still has access to their Dynamax, and that's exactly the move that Guillermo has looked into here. We're going to see the Dynamax Gastrodon join the field. This is something I'm delighted to see, and it certainly is the Pokemon that can apply that pressure. If it wants to go for something like a Max Geyser, that will deal a huge chunk of damage to something like that Colossal, and it does allow Gastrodon the extra health to be able to survive something like a Max Overgrowth here. The Bayonet Blade comes out first of all from the Zacian. It's going to connect onto that Gastrodon that has just Dynamax, does a decent chunk of damage, and this is where things can get precarious. Even if you have the Rindo Berry, it's like 4 times effective move against you. You have to be careful with these calculations. Zacian, however, is able to survive the overheat that came out from that opposing Rotom as well. It is indeed going to be the Overgrowth coming out. The Rindo Berry has been eaten by this Gastrodon. I wonder how much this is going to do, Lee.
Oh, I don't think it's going to nowhere near enough. You see with the Dynamax there and the Rindo Berry kind of on top of that, without the weakness policy, even with the weakness policy, I don't think that would have been enough to take it down. And the Gastrodon able to take that. But this turn's pivotal. You need to remove the Colossal from the field with this attack.
Yep, going for the Max Quake down into the Zacian, however, just removing it from the fray, and the Colossal actually getting through this turn relatively sort of untouched at this point. Amazing actually seeing the damage from that Gastrodon. I think I always live in fear from the times when I've used Gastrodon and get absolutely bopped by any kind of grass type move coming in the direction, and essentially that's why these players are out there and we're behind the desk here, Lee. The Rotom, however, even though it did some good damage to the opposing Zacian, the low HP puts it in the range of those rocks and it will be KO'd. Gastrodon, however, going to be able to utilize the grassy terrain that has just been set up, but now it certainly is sitting in a very precarious situation against that Colossal.
Yeah, especially with the grassy terrain now boosting the Max Overgrowth that could potentially come out from the Colossal this next turn as well, you know. That makes it very difficult for this Gastrodon to be able to kind of survive another one of those attacks. And the worst thing around that as well is that, your Rindo Berry's gone, so you've got no additional protection. And we know the Colossal is going to be hitting before the Gastrodon. We know Guillermo's probably likely got the Zacian in the back to come in, but Antonio still has access to his Incineroar to come in and kind of counteract that Zacian play, get the Intimidate onto the field, and also provide fake out support to stop the potential Zacian from attacking at least one more turn and pile a lot of pressure onto the Gastrodon. The one thing that you could potentially do is maybe predict a Max Guard from Guillermo's Gastrodon here. It is an option because it feels like it's in such an awkward position right now. It makes sense, and then that's the end of the max turns for the Colossal. So you could take this turn if you are Antonio to maybe set the Sun up, double tap into the Zacian slot. You're going to get some damage onto it, get the Sun up. It reduces the attack power of water type attacks as well, and then gives you access to Solar Beam the following turn, which then you can deal with the Gastrodon quite easily from that spot.
That's the thing, Colossal's really in the driving seat right now. You know that you can target down into that Zacian, like you said, with the Max Flare, and there's really not a lot the Zacian can do to really intimidate that opposing Colossal at the moment. Even the Bayonet Blade is really, really healthy. It's not going to be dealing the damage needed. It does, however, go for a Protect. It looks like Incineroar was going for the Fake Out into that particular slot, so the Protect is wise, but the Protect is actually, very, very wise here. The Gastrodon is going to fall victim to the... oh, no, it's not. It's able to survive to the Overgrowth.
Survives.
Oh, of course, there's no weakness policy activation on this Colossal, Lee. I keep forgetting that. I'm so used to seeing Colossal in its full form, but it does allow the Gastrodon to be able to go for that Max Quake into the opposing Incineroar. It's going to be boosting up the special defense on both the Zacian and the Gastrodon. I know Gastrodon really is now in the very lowest of health, but the Zacian now potentially will be able to deal with that Colossal just a little bit better. The issue is you've got Colossal and Incineroar, both capable of Fire-type moves, and Zacian can only really attack one at a time.
Yeah, that's the problem here. A really nice play there from Antonio. Decided not to really do anything fancy, just go straight down the line, do what he needs to do, and get the damage onto that Gastrodon now, where the next turn, the G-Max Volcal, is going to be enough to pick up the knockout there onto the Gastrodon. So your only concern really now going forward is the Zacian. And you can potentially switch out. You've got room to switch out your Incineroar to bring it back in again to potentially get another Intimidate, another Fake Out onto that Zacian later in this game. So it'll be interesting to see how Antonio approaches this turn. Does he preserve the Colossal here, just go for a Protect potentially? And if you do see the Protect here, you could see the potential weakness policy then activated on the Colossal, which would make things a little bit more interesting, especially going into an end game between these two players.
Well, Colossal just going to go for a Protect here. Doesn't want to take any unnecessary damage from this opposing Gastrodon. Zacian is going to be going straight for the close combat into the Incineroar and will remove it here from play. So this now opens up an interesting situation here for this Colossal, for the Gastrodon here, 'cause depending on what it's gone into here, it could accidentally be activating, like you said, the weakness policy and things like that if it goes for the Max Geyser, but instead it's going to be the Max Quake, targeting down into Colossal. Does a huge chunk of damage here, so we're not going to see any steam engine activation, but I think we're going to see something else.
Yeah, we are probably going to see the weakness policy activate here through that protect. The issue is, if you've got something like Urshifu in the back to bring in and you want to utilize the Aqua Jet, you just can't do that in front of the Gastrodon. But like we've already mentioned, the residual damage here going to be enough now to remove the Gastrodon from the field. So Antonio kind of setting up this position really well here, and as we see the Gastrodon go down, removing that Storm Drain is the most imperative thing if the Urshifu is in the back for Antonio, to get your Colossal setup this next turn to be able to deal with a Zacian that is such a threat on Guillermo's side of the field.
And with the Gastrodon being KO'd, it allows Urshifu complete free reign to go for something like that cheeky side Aqua Jet to be able to allow Colossal to have its Steam Engine activated as well, allowing it to be the fastest thing. And that poor Zacian will just be in the sight of that Colossal. Something like a Heat Wave coming down onto us will be a lot, but no, actually no activation coming out here. Colossal does go down to the close combat coming out from this Zacian, but due to the close combat drops on the defenses of this Zacian, we know there's no focus Zacian on there. It's going to be holding the Rusted Sword. This could be the opportunity that the Urshifu needs to be able to pick up a KO against it.
Yeah, you make a good point with those defense drops that the close combat has as kind of a drawback. It's going to be enough here, as you see with the Urshifu, just to not even worry about setting up the Colossal, just going straight for that attack